My name is Jerry Wedge. I'm an architect by training. I'm also a painter. I've had a studio in the building since 2005. I've been painting since about 2008. I had the studio for several years and I was practicing architecture out of the studio. And I found myself, it was harder and harder to get here to work on architecture because everybody else was painting. And I hit the significant birthday and we went on a trip and I met an artist who we loved her work. And we were talking to her and she said, I just started painting one day. And then I put my painting out at a flea market and somebody bought it. So I started thinking, well, I could do that. I've got the space. So I just came back and I bought some panels and bought some paints and I just started painting with it. The way I differentiate myself from the modern painters is that I build my work up over a long period of time. So it's layer upon layer upon layer. And while the end painting might be a bold red piece, it may have been built up with reds or blues and yellows and greens and multiple different colors. So as I'm putting on layers of paint, I scratch off surfaces and kind of reveal previous layers. And I kind of like to think about it as kind of the life of the painting. I think everybody's life, you go through phases and you get good at one thing and then you move on and you do another thing. And so these layers, while I might have a beautiful palette that I'm working with, I end up covering it up and making it something else. So, well, the initial impression is a really bold piece. When you come up to it, you start to see the life of the painting and where it's been.
My name is Louise Arnold. I'm primarily a landscape painter. I work both here at the Umbrella and in Vermont during the summer and fall months. My background is in landscape architecture, but I've always done a lot of drawing, and I work observationally. So a lot of my work has been based on working from observing rather than from my imagination. In a way, it's a spiritual kind of feeling or connection that I have with the place I'm working. And if I'm painting something, I have to feel a very strong connection or an empathy for where I'm working. And it's almost like a dialogue, like I'll project me, who I am, where I come from, into the landscape, but then I'll also feed off of what I'm experiencing and internalize it and then transform it when I'm painting. I may start out with certain expectations about what's going to happen with what I'm doing, and then during the process of making, a lot of other possibilities open up, things come to light, and so I have to maybe shift my trajectory from what I initially thought was going to happen to, and just sort of let it happen to what's happening. And that's sort of very interesting because it's a more fluid process and you have to open yourself up to sort of new ideas and new ways of working. But oftentimes with very unanticipated but wonderful results.
I'm Deb Lovard. I'm up on the third floor, Studio 316, and I've been a resident artist here for about 18 years now. I enjoy working with gouache, my medium of choice, because I love its vibrancy and I love doing detail and humor in my work, and I find it's just the perfect medium to express myself in that way. I have two ongoing series that are my main focus. My two series are the portentous moments, which are those moments in life when you're taking a fateful step. I've always been intrigued with the ironies and absurdities in everyday life, and I had another idea years ago where I used letters of the alphabet, which I've always seen as little characters, almost personified. So I started another series, the Letter Speak series, where the letters are having conversations based on their shape. And again, I can use abstractions in the letters, I can use vibrant colors in the backgrounds, and get my ideas across in a humorous way. I love the colors. Just opening tubes of gouache and looking at those colors just excites me. And I will actually look at a color and say, oh, that's wonderful. What can I paint?
My name is Gregory Maguire. I'm a writer. I'm often asked about how to become a writer or how I became a writer. And I think the single most important element for any artist is stultifying boredom. You have to be so chilled out by the world that you are forced back into the excitement and the energy and the snap, crackle, poppedness of your own mind. It seems to me that ideas come around me a little bit like airplanes circling an airport. Some of them come from very far away, and they're hovering about for a long time, like a mosquito way far up. They're waiting for runway clearance. But if I'm busy at another book, I have to say, we don't have a runway clear yet. You know, hold on, I'll keep typing. I'll try to clear something for you. A book is a little bit like a souffle. You really can overdo it. It can collapse. You have to have a great sense of timing where it's just the right degree of novelty and allure, but it hasn't been overworked. It's a lesson for me, who tends to write long books, to say, okay, stop, sniff the goods. If it doesn't smell foul, if it's still alluring, take it out, let it air, leave it alone for a while, put it on the side of my desk for a half a year, go back and look at it and say, was that exactly what I wanted? And it's never exactly what you want, but if it's close enough, then it's done.
My name is Suzanne Maturko. My studio is 305 at the Umbrella. My medium is primarily oil. I paint on oil canvases and panels, and sometimes I do little studies on paper, which I then matte and put behind glass. I also do a little bit of watercolor. I think I knew when I was an artist when I was pretty young. I was probably 9 or 10 years old in school, and the kids were all involved in an art project. And it must have been around the first, of September, when the leaves were coming down, and I was asked to do a drawing of a maple leaf. And, it came up pretty well, not too much time. And everybody was so impressed with that. And, from there I got, some really nice recognition for something that I didn't think was all that important. So I guess that was sort of the beginning of my knowing that, well, I have something here, and it's something to pursue. But also the materials themselves, I get really excited when I get new materials. Oh, what am I going to do with this one? Oh, now I can use that photograph to work something out on this new canvas. I just like the idea of experimenting with different kinds of paints and textures, and so the art making process is a very inspiring sort of thing for me.
My name is Caitlyn Marsh, and what I do here at the Umbrella is I'm a ceramic artist. So I'm a potter and a sculptor, and I basically do everything clay. I've been really into art ever since I was a little kid. Growing up, I spent a lot of time drawing. As I got into high school, I moved more into three-dimensional art. I really just like building stuff. The idea of creating something out of practically nothing was really powerful to me. I do a lot of vessels, a lot of cups, bowls, plates, functional dinnerware. So some of the pots I'll make are sort of simple in form, but I'm kind of just using them as a canvas. Lately, what I do is I paint on latex, and I do really geometric patterns, and then I wash over it with a solid underglaze color. And that's just all while the clay is still green before everything's even been fired. So then you go through your first firing process, and then I layer more, I outline the shapes, I do more latex resist designs, and then I start using glazes. So it's really just figuring out how these patterns work and then just getting everything to melt properly, firing to the right temperature, getting the right textures and colors. That's a big part of it. Yeah, it's a lot.
My name is Jean Lightman, and my studio is 312. I work in primarily oils. I work some in pastel, two-dimensional paintings. And the best way to describe it, I usually say that I work in the Boston school tradition. I once heard a painter say, somebody asked him, what's your best painting? And he said, my next one. And I think what gets me out of bed in the morning is that excitement of some vision or some, you know, it might be something that I've set up, it might be glorious live peonies. I think for me it's always this quest to be able to capture the magic that I see in the colors and the light on the actual objects. So I'm looking at nature, and to try and translate that into paint is an eternal quest, because I'm never satisfied. You know, you can never really capture all the beauty in nature in paint. I think everyone appreciates beauty, and for me, art connects us all to some deeper place inside, some place that we go to for really to renew our spirit, and I feel eternally grateful to be able to do art that other people can see and can bring them joy.
My name is Mimsey, and I'm an artist here at the Umbrella. I work mostly in landscape and on paper. With paper, I enjoy painting, drawing, sculpting, and just about anything I can do with it. I work mostly in watercolor, inks, crayons. My latest is China markers for drawing, and I've been known to use glitter and all sorts of stuff in my paintings. While I draw quite realistically, my landscapes tend to be rather abstract. I'm obsessed with landscape, the color, the texture, the marks that mankind makes on it. But more than anything, the sense of place and identity and how it felt to be in that place. And that's what I'm trying to achieve when I paint. How did it feel to be there? I started drawing very young. I think it was my mother's lipstick, so they went out and got me crayons, figuring this was a losing battle. I've never not been drawing and painting, and I had very indulgent parents who got me all sorts of private art lessons when I was a kid. So it's just part of me. And everything fell into place when I was lucky enough to go on some pretty spectacular trips to wild landscapes. And I was with a couple of biologists, and one of them worked for Conservation International. And all of a sudden I knew what I could do with my art to help preserve landscape. So every year at Open Studios, I offer my watercolor sketches, and I'm working towards preserving 10,000 acres.
My name's Julia Miner. I'm an architect and a painter, and I do children's book illustration. Well, there's a common thread that joins all of my work, even though they seem to be three disparate careers, and that's what I refer to as the poetry of place. And it's an idea about the spirit of a place, or genus loci, that informs architecture and planning, or a painting when I'm painting out on location, or a book, which it helps to create a mood, and when you have a real sense of place. And it also, with the historic fiction, it locates it in time and space. To me, when you are in awe of the way a stone wall is built, or the way, you know, beautiful local materials, the way the sunlight might hit beautiful local materials on a wall that was built 300 years ago, to me that's just really inspiring. And I love modern abstract forms especially when they respond or they reflect somehow that vernacular language that's been around in a particular region for a long time. I've always loved drawing and painting, and I've always taken courses all through. I was an art major, and then I took courses in architecture and independent study and drawing, and then more classes. But I've always been an artist, I guess, ever since I was a kid.
My name is Carole Parrish, and I work in pastel. I do mostly landscapes and some abstract work as well. I'm very drawn to the ocean. I do a lot of my work at the Cape, so I do a lot of marshes. And I take what I see and I interpret it, so my paintings don't always look exactly like what I've started out painting. But they certainly have the feeling of the environment that I'm trying to create. I have trouble with the word artist because I feel like we're all artists. I think it was Pablo Picasso that said that everybody is born as an artist, and it's just trying to maintain that as you grow up into adulthood. And I think that, you know, being an artist is just being an expression of who we are. So I resist that. It feels exclusive to me, and I think it's much more of an inclusive kind of thing. So I've always been aware that I love to work with my hands and that I love beauty, and I like to be creating. So there's not a time. It's like asking me, when did I realize I was a girl? I don't know, just kind of always known that.
My name's Carole Kraus. I'm a fine art photographer, and I'm in Studio 115 downstairs on the ground floor. I work in both black and white and in color. Black and white is my first love. It's what I started doing when I was a little kid and still do. Most of my black and white work is still film-based, and most of my color work is digitally based. I first got started in photography when my mother gave me a camera a long time ago when I was a little kid. We used to live overseas, and she had a lot of old, very nice cameras, and she gave me a Leica as my first camera. And I still have that same one. I'm still occasionally will put 35mm film into it, load it up, and shoot it away. It's 100% mechanical. There are no batteries to go stale. Years ago, when I had my first show at Emerson Umbrella, it was the first time I'd ever put my work on display. I was scared stiff. And at the opening reception, there were all these people there, and I didn't know who these people were, but they all came from the, you know, people who come to the Umbrella to see shows here. And it was a show that combined image and words, so it had some stories and some little poems that I had written with it. And there was one person at the show, and she was running around with tears coming down her face, going, "Who is this artist? Who did this work? Because I am so moved by it." And I had no idea who she was. And at that point, I made this connection in my head that, oh, I've actually arrived. I've begun this photographic journey. I've started figuring out how to touch people in a very personal way simply by jogging their memory with an image. So that made me feel like I was really appreciated as an artist.
My name is Cynthia Katz, and my studio is number 314. I'm a photographer and have been making photographs for quite a while. I grew up in a family where my dad was a commercial photographer, so I was around photography all the time. I knew from an early age that I didn't want to be a commercial photographer. I thought I was going to be a fiber artist, and then I took a Photo 1 class in college, and I had an aha moment. And I still remember the photograph, and I still have the photograph. It was Photo 1. I was standing across the street from a hairdressing salon, and in the window was a vertical image of a woman, her hair in curlers, but they weren't curlers, they were forks and spoons and knives in her hair. And I was making this I was about to make this photograph, and just before I pressed the button, a woman got up out of her car and appeared in the lower corner of the image in juxtaposition to the to the portrait in the window and I pressed the button, and it was early on in the day and I had to wait till I got back and process the film to see if I got it. But it really was in that moment where I thought, this is really cool. Photography is really cool. Photography has been the reason or inspiration for spending time with people, and spending time with people has been the inspiration for making photographs. So it kind of goes both ways.
Hi, I'm Andy Newman. I'm in Studio 215. I'm a painter who works in a variety of media, primarily oils, but also acrylics, pastels, and colored pencils. Prior to becoming a painter and moving up here to Massachusetts, I worked for 15-20 years as a lawyer in Washington, D.C. And about 25 years ago, a friend of mine gave me a paint set, and I started painting more and more, primarily at the weekends. And a certain point arrived where I thought, you only live once. I much more enjoy painting than I do trooping into the office every day. So I figured, let's do this and become a painter. My subject matter covers the waterfront. I do landscapes, I do townscapes, trees, figures, abstracts, you name it. And in addition to exhibiting here in Massachusetts, I'm represented by galleries throughout New England and also in Canada, France, Portugal, and England. So please feel free to stop by Studio 215. It's always a pleasure to have visitors.
My name is Miranda Hynes, and I am the office manager at The Umbrella. I'm also a painter, a singer-songwriter, and an author. My book is called Don't Make Art, Just Make Something, and I wrote it when I was in grad school last year, and it kind of centers around the idea that art can be very, very scary for some people, like capital A, museum-worthy art is very intimidating, and so when people try and make that, a lot of people end up making nothing at all. And so I wrote the book about the idea that if you just make something, you know, something is not scary. Everyone makes something. It's just a byproduct of being alive. And then you make one something, and it turns into another something and another something, and that is actually how you end up making art in the long run. I love to paint, I love to play guitar, and I love to write. But the underlying passion for me is just the actual process of creating things. I honestly don't care what I make. I mean, you could burn all of my paintings and I'd be upset, but I wouldn't be destroyed. Because for me, it's actually kind of sad when a painting's done. Because it's done. I mean, there's nothing more to do to it. I like painting. I don't like a painting. So instead of kind of being bogged down at the end of the day because I've been doing spreadsheets and blah, I'm really inspired, and I leave and all I want to do is make my own art. So I actually do. I work full time and I go home and then I make art as much as I can.
My name is Priscilla Parrott. I'm a painter of with watercolor, pastels. I paint on silk with dyes. I also paint on pottery. My father was an artist and an architect, and he took us painting out in the meadow when we were 5. And so we got an early introduction. My favorite subject is Italy. And it just sort of runs in the family. It's as if I were Italian. I love it so. And I go over there quite a bit and take my sketch pad and I treasure my sketchbooks. And I'm still doing pastels and watercolors from my sketchbook. To do the colors, I have the rather poor snapshots. Often I took snapshots from the bus, and I don't know, it seems to come from somewhere, because one of the classes that we were supposed to take in Italy was color theory. Color theory. The heck with it. I couldn't do it as a science. And so it just happened. I guess I'm lucky.
My name is Suzanne Hill. I've been working in clay for over 40 years. What I'm really proud of now is my Sagar series. It was inspired by the landscapes of the Southwest. When I'm working and trying to get new forms, what I basically do is start to draw them out. First I'm thinking about them, then I draw them out, then I start working small to perfect the way I need to throw, and then I'll work larger. One of my primary inspirations is landscape, and it's been that way really since I started working in clay, but the way I approach landscapes has changed dramatically. I used to draw on my pieces, I used to draw the landscape out, and now my landscapes are quite abstract, and the colors and the designs come from burning combustible materials inside a kiln, inside a pot. So what I have is the marks that hay or seaweed or straw make on the side of the pieces, but they become a landscape in themselves, and the way I place it makes them look the way I want to, but in a very abstract way. Again, you're always experimenting when you're decorating. Some things work out, some things don't. It's just the way it is.
My name is Max Payne, and my studio is number 214. I do a lot of different kinds of things, but basically I'm a mixed media artist, and I do sculptures that are based somewhat on realistic kind of things, and then they take off from there, and they're nature-based. I use a lot of natural materials and twigs and found materials, a lot of recycled things. I like that idea. I like being outside. I like old things. If they're not already old, I usually make them look old. I'm not sure my art connects with any world that I know of. It's mostly connects with myths and stories that I've read and stories that I've written and things that I've seen. But I always take it and put a little different spin on it. So if it connects at the edges in some way. I always think of it as a liminal edge. And I like that word a lot because it means a space between, it means a space where everything is possible. It doesn't come from a grounded place or a space place. It comes from this kind of maybe chaotic kind of place in between.
Good morning. My name is Ilse Plume, and I'm an illustrator here at the Emerson Umbrella. I have worked on children's book illustrations for a really long time, and most of my career, I think, has been in that direction. Although I started out as a printmaker, so printmaking is still one of the loves of my life. And actually, my mom has a funny story in that she says that I used to chew the paint off the crib, the edge of the crib, so that was when she knew I would be an artist. So she spent a lot of time taking me to museums, and so I was the kid that could do the daffodils and put them on the bulletin board, you know, as opposed to being great in math or sports. And I think children gravitate to something they feel they can excel with, and since I seemed to get a lot of reinforcement with that, I, you know, kept progressing. I guess I was inspired mostly by my daughter to do children's books as time went on, because, you know, as you're bringing books home for a child to look at, you're more aware of the process of what, you know, what's going on here. And one day I just had this sudden thought, like, gee, maybe I could, you know, do a children's book. The first book that I did, which I had no idea that it would, you know, result in such a favorable review. At that point, I was just hoping that, you know, to get something published, A, and B, you know, maybe my parents would like it. You know, you're not kind of thinking long range. So it was a wonderful surprise, of course, to get the Caldecott honor. And so this book is The Bremerton Musicians, and that was probably the most fun that I've had with a book, because at that point there wasn't a lot of pressure. You know, you have to measure up and do this, or your last book was better than. You know, it was just like kind of coming from the heart and just really working at something that I love to do.
My name is Lonnie Harvey. I'm in Studio 128. I'm a printmaker and I make monoprints. Monoprints are one-of-a-kind prints, and they're called painterly prints because the basic process is I make a painting on plexiglass and then I transfer that painting onto paper using an etching press. I remember when I was in kindergarten, we have those little workbooks and you could circle the profession you loved the most, and so I circled ballerina and artist. Well, obviously I didn't become a ballerina, but I always loved to draw, and so even as early as 2 years old, I was drawing on everything and inside the covers of books, and I even drew a picture on the piano that I don't remember doing, but it was there, carved in there with pencil. And I used to draw smiling cats a lot, so that was, something I've always loved doing, and yeah, I pursued it, and I love it. It's wonderful. I can't imagine doing anything else.
I'm Mary Pope. I'm in Studio 307. I'm a landscape oil painter. I have always been an artist. My family is filled with architects and other forms of artists. And my father, of course, put me right into math, and that wasn't particularly fulfilling. And I think once I had time on my own, I found crafts and jewelry and pottery mainly pottery. And so painting was just something I tried as much as I try anything. I started out as a watercolor painter because I was a brand new painter, and that is one of the best ways to learn color mixing and become a good draftsman and learn perspective. And after 1,000 paintings, which I had some portion of it which I was unhappy with, I decided oils gave me the little bit more of a three-dimensional quality to what I was doing and allowed me to change what I put down. I find beauty almost everywhere, but to make a good painting you have to have a little bit of your soul in it, so that it has to have a connection. And I like things with a mood, and maybe I might be a moody person, but I'm not sure that's why, but I do like things that permit me to contemplate and to brood over what I'm looking at.
My name is Marie-Louise Petrie, otherwise known as Wheezy, and I do paintings, and I work in different kinds of medium. I work in oil painting, pastels, and watercolor. I like to work with landscapes and paint landscapes. And I especially like landscapes that are devoid of human form, mostly that are, for example, like when the sun hits the back of the trees at a certain time of day or a certain time of year. And I like to use color to kind of express the mood or the feelings that are evoked by those moments. One quote I love which was said by Robert Henry. He said, "I look for what I love and try to capture it." And that's what I try to do in the environment around me. I've always loved looking at art, but I think I really got excited about doing art when I was in high school and took an art class and had an inspirational teacher and who sort of opened up my eyes to the art world, and I learned a lot about art history. And then in college I was a fine arts major, so I was both a painting major and an art history major. And the more and more I learned about art, the more I fell in love with it, and it became a passion. The future holds, I hope, more time to paint as my children have aged and I've had more time, and I hope to travel and go to more places where I can engage with the landscape.
My name is Deb Richardson, and I'm a jeweler. I'm also a metalsmith. I'm delineating between the two because I make jewelry, but I also do shadow boxes that use different kinds of metals. I use sterling silver, 14 karat gold, and gold-filled wires and sheet, and I fabricate my pieces using various techniques to form the ornaments that I'm trying to achieve. I started making jewelry about 30 years ago. I had been a potter, and I had had a part-time job as a jeweler, or I should say I worked in the workshop for a jeweler. So I started to keep a studio that had clay on one side and metal on the other, and eventually I let it give way to the metals. I get most of my inspiration from nature, and I feel that it's something that is a very common thread that runs throughout the Emerson umbrella. I love to walk in the conservation land in this area, and my forms tend to be organic, they're flowing. both in a linear fashion as well as in the shapes that I choose that are more solid forms. Well, personally, I would love to branch out from just doing jewelry for a living and get back to a little of the clay work and do some collage. And I've started to do some sketches and how to kind of marry the two together, since I seem to have a facility for both now. But my hope is to be able to do more art for art's sake and not just for something that you know, people wear and that I feel I have to make in order to make a living. I'd like to just do something for me in terms of an art form.
My name is Sing Hansen, and I'm a photographer of a sort. I used to be a painter, and I now paint with a camera, and I blur the edges pretty much in between. If I'm really successful, you might mistake one for the other. I also am fond of abstraction, and so if I could play tricks on you a little bit, and you weren't quite sure what I was photographing, that would be okay with me. I would think that would be just delightful. I work in a series quite often when I'm photographing, and often will try a series. I might find 1 or 2 or 3 pictures that held together, and then I might go off on a toot with that. My first really good series was something called Storm in a Bottle. There was a bottle about this big around. We have a vineyard. It was a winemaker's jug, and I left it out overnight on an autumn night, and I left it with the top and a little bit of water in it. Just didn't get it all out. And when I came out in the morning, it was just beautiful. It was beautiful. There were frost flowers all over the inside of the bottle, and it glowed from inside, and it was just amazing. And what a wonderful set of mornings. You know, there's nothing like being up at sunrise anyway. It's just magic. It was just magic.
My name is Lynn Avery Gargill, and I use oil paint on canvas as my only medium, really. I have done drawing in the past, but now I just really do oil paintings. I started doing portraits of my classmates in charcoal and pencil at an early age. At the school, they were very much appreciated. So I thought I felt very good about that. And I thought I was going to be a portrait painter. But I went to Europe in my early 20s, I was 20, and I discovered abstraction. I think that I'm idealistic. I think I'm hoping for a better world. I like to be involved in things that help to bring that about. I think you only do the best you can do. And there are some paintings where I get to a certain point and I've done all that I can do, but I don't feel that it's there yet. It's not where I want it to be, so I leave it. Rather than ruin it, which I've done in the past. I've learned that when I don't know exactly how to get where I want to get, I wait and I put it aside, and that helps. Because I can come back to it maybe weeks later, maybe months later, sometimes even years later, and then I can finish it.
My name is Wayne Guillen. I'm an illustrator. I've been illustrating children's books for the last 20 years, and before that I've illustrated the games, jigsaw puzzles, and done many other kinds of commercial art. I wanted to be a commercial artist, so I went to a commercial art school. When I got out of the school, I set small goals up. The first goal was to get a job in the art field. Once I got a job in the art field, I wanted to have a painting that would be actually published. And the first job that I had that had illustration done was a jigsaw puzzle painted a jigsaw puzzle for a game. And I was so excited that it was the first thing I've ever had published, and I knew people would be seeing it all over. And I still have that painting right now on my wall. I'm not going to sell it. I'm never going to sell it. But it was like the first exciting thing that happened to me at that particular time in my life. My particular challenge is that when I was 30 years old, I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. And I've learned how to paint with my left hand over the years. So it was a transition from a right-handed artist to a left-handed artist. And I've been doing that ever since. And I noticed that everybody that I've talked to have some kind of challenge, whether it's physical or something that comes up in their life that makes things difficult, and it's a matter of moving forward and trying to get by in life.
My name's Bill Davison. I'm in Studio 115. I make pictures photographically, and almost all of the output at this point is digital on various media. But I also output on some silver gelatin at this point too. I do primarily black and white. I find the abstract nature of black and white to be, for me, superior to color. So I tend to gravitate towards monochrome black and white prints. Well, I was weaned on film, so I think a lot of the sensitivity that I do have towards imaging is geared towards my experience with film. I don't consciously emulate it, but I consider myself more of a printer than I do a photographer. I really revel in the artifact. I love a fine print, rich stock, well presented, with the kind of detail and the kind of finish, if you will, that people want to come back to. So I definitely have a preference for paper. I don't call myself an artist. I reserve that term for very few people. So when someone considers what I do to be art, I'm totally flattered, and I certainly aspire to being an artist. But I find it difficult to call myself one.
My name is Nancy Roberts. I'm a photographer, and I've been at the Emerson Umbrella for 25 years. I'm mainly a black and white photographer, or I started as a black and white photographer all my life, so that's why I still have a darkroom here. My work is pretty autobiographical. I'm mainly concentrated on self-portraiture for over 35 years. I started photography in the 70s, and I think I was pretty influenced by the feminist movement back then, and one of the things that they were talking about was women becoming their own image makers. The first time I did a self-portrait, I was taking pictures in Maine at a drive-in movie theater, and I was just taking pictures, and I thought, this is boring, there needs to be a person. So I put myself in front of the camera, and that was great. And then from then on, I just started doing self-portraits. When I had a family, I started doing myself with my family. Pregnancy was a great photo opportunity. I've published 2 books. One was mainly a book of self-portraiture called Recognitions, and it was self-portraits ever since I'd started 35 years ago up until I got married. So there was nothing about my family in it. And the other book I did was with a friend of mine in Carlisle named Deanne Bodman, and I photographed her house as it was an old farmhouse from the 1740s, and I photographed it before it was demolished and rebuilt. And she wrote poetry during the same time, and then we put it together as a book.
My name is Pierre Chiha. I'm a photographer and a filmmaker. I consider myself a citizen of the world, having been born in Africa and Egypt, raised in the Middle East, educated in France, and then moved to the US when I was in my 20s. I feel comfortable in just about any place around. I've photographed in those countries, I've photographed in many locations, and after a while they all kind of feel like home. I got my first camera from my mother when I was 13. I got hooked. I couldn't put it down. And then I learned from my cousin how to do development in the darkroom. And then from there evolved into digital and became a professional photographer about 20 years ago after a long career in science and computer world. Right now, I am most proud of my ability to do environmental portraits, where I combine both the subject and a given environment that can be connected to them and has maybe a spiritual connection or has an intellectual connection. And when I can connect those two together and create a landscape as well as a portrait at the same time, I get very excited about that. Most kids graduating from college today will have on average 5 careers. Well, I'm ahead of it because I'm going to start my 6th career, which is the one in filmmaking. I've been thinking about filmmaking for such a long time, and now I'm excited about going ahead and doing it. My biggest accomplishment in art has not yet occurred. I'm still working at it and keep discovering new things. And maybe it will be in the area of filmmaking. Maybe it will be in the area of photography. I don't know yet.
I'm Margaret Savage, and I'm on the 3rd floor. My studio is number 304, and I'm a painter. Well, when I was a child, I had an older brother who was an artist, and I can just see myself following him around and begging for a piece of charcoal or something like that, and trying to do what he did, and he was very patient with me. But I also went to a museum school for a while for children. And after that, I guess I took a class here and a class there. But I always felt as though I wanted to get back to real basics. I just had this idea in my head that I should go back to school and get a degree in painting, which I hadn't done before. And so that's what I did, and it made me feel a sense of accomplishment. When I started teaching watercolor here, some of the same people would keep coming, and it really became a fun group to teach. They all became very acquainted and interested in each other's work. They were really excited about painting and watercolor. And they wrote up a shirt for me that said all of the savage-isms that I would say to them, such as, I think you've done enough, take it to the sink, maybe you could start over. But it was very comical, and they were just a great group.
My name is Lesia Shaw. I'm in Studio 321. My main media that I'm really proud of is my traditional Chinese landscape painting, meaning using material that is shipped to me from China. And the next medium that I'm very pleased with is my watercolors. I've progressed considerably. And now I'm very experimental with playing around and making them very loose and quick. However, what I have to do is keep watercolor and Chinese separate because they're different expressions. It's challenging to envision what you want to paint ahead of time and then just let it flow and have that sensitivity. Otherwise, it gets muddy very quickly and confusing. And at one time, I was known Queen of Mud kind of a thing because I kept layering and layering. Now, like Chinese, you have to see the picture as a whole and trust that it'll come out. And if there's an accident, just let it go and do something with it. The thing as a child that I was most attracted to was the Asian philosophy, the Eastern philosophy in general. And therefore, I became very interested in Asian art. And then in my world travels, I met people from different parts of the world and decided what kinds of watercolors I wanted to start out with, what kind of Chinese painting or Asian, painting I wanted to do, and that's how I started, and it's been going on now for maybe 25 years or more.
My name is Liza Carter. I'm an author and photographer. I also paint watercolors, but primarily my big project has been a photography book that's documenting the daily life of a nomadic Mongolian family. So the first thing that took me to Mongolia actually was camels. I'm an environmental scientist originally by training, and I was part of a scientific expedition that was there to look at the possibility of doing a study on the endangered Bactrian two-humped camels. We didn't really find camels, but I totally fell in love with the nomadic Mongolian people and came back to this country very curious. I spent 3 or 4 days in the Harvard Anthropology Library trying to find out everything I could about that way of life, and there was practically nothing that was written. So I thought, okay, I can do that. And I went back with the vision of finding a family that had a girl that raced in the long-distance horseback races. The long-distance horseback races are part of their, like the equivalent of our 4th of July celebration. They happen all over the country. And the jockeys are children from age 6 to 13. So I was looking for a family with a girl that raced. And I found this amazing family who became my collaborators in this process. And they welcomed me into the family, into all parts of their life. And I asked millions of questions. I was taking photographs constantly. I was there during different seasons of the year. And it was a 4-year arc of doing the research. So my whole desire in this book was to document this traditional way of life before it disappeared. I knew I was catching something before it disappeared. I didn't realize that I was catching it just as it was disappearing. So it's still there, but in a very different way. And I feel tremendously honored and lucky that I was able to catch it and document it in a way that was really comprehensive before it changed in a big way.
My name's Jason Springer. I'm the Director of Education at the Umbrella. Art, I think, is a part of everybody's life in one way or another. The word art to me is something that is done with intention, is done with thought and sort of creativity, whether it's cooking or knitting or whatever it is that your hobby is. I would say that my artistic creation falls in lines with freestyle, poetry, as well as art criticism and writing about artwork in current exhibitions. Well, one of the things that got me into arts education in the first place was I was a gallery manager a long time ago, and the thing that I enjoyed most was talking people through an exhibition. And during those conversations, I realized that what I was doing was making this thing, sometimes abstract, sometimes really dense thematic material, that this artist was trying to had a message, and it was breaking that message down into a way that just the person walking in off the street could process it and understand it and be part of it and bring it into their worldview and their experience. And then that was the real connection there. When people are able to take a work of art and incorporate its themes or its meaning into their own life, that's a real moment of connection there. And I think in general, we all need moments of connection. That's what we're searching for. And so art can be this avenue that can bring people together, can bring, create a community, if you will.
My name's John Schmallenberger. I'm a furniture cabinet maker here at the Emerson Umbrella. And I do custom furniture of all kinds, is basically what I do. Commission work, mostly. I do some pieces that are just kicking around in my head and hope that they sell. You never know. I went to school at North Bennett Street School in the furniture and cabinet making department. It's a 2-year program, and they teach you how to use hand tools primarily. And the theory being that if you can build by hand, you can build anything. And if you build dependent upon your machines, then you're constrained by what your machines can do. My favorite thing to build is tables. Don't know why. I just love building tables. And my favorite style is arts and crafts style, craftsman, furniture. And I just love to build. I don't care to have the stuff when I'm done, for the most part. I just like to make it. And it's a thrill for me to have people come to me and say, I'm going to give you money and could you build this for me? I was like, sure.
My name is Brian Boruta, and I'm the Director of Performing Arts here at the Umbrella. We do just about everything. The new expanded performing arts schedule includes concerts, and we're growing a film program. We do plays and musicals for all types of different audiences, kids and adults. And when we're not presenting something, we rent out the venue to be used for other local community groups to present their programming in the building as well. So really, just about every weekend, every year, there's some sort of performing arts programming happening in the theater. I started performing way long time ago. I was trained as a professional performer. I've performed in New York and Seattle, Boston, Providence, up and down the East Coast, so I did that for a long time. I met a bunch of designers and technicians, and I sort of started hanging around with them and learning what they did, and was able to start freelancing my services out when I wasn't performing to local schools and colleges and universities. I've designed scenery and lighting for a number of schools in the area, Framingham, Chelsea, Brookline, and I've participated in a lot of the educational theater festivals. So my background's kind of comprehensive, and I went on to get my MFA, as I mentioned, in solo performance, which was kind of cool. So I did a lot of mask making and solo mask performance. I guess if I had to say one thing that I haven't done yet that I'm really itching to get into, I would love to music direct a piece and get my hands on a score and really sort of understand it from that angle. I haven't been able to do that yet. But at the end of the day, I love to perform. I love to be on stage. I love to get up there and you know, just be in front of an audience and feel what that feels like. So if I had to pick one thing, I'd probably be on stage.
My name is K.O. Berman, and I'm on the 3rd floor at the Umbrella, and my studio number is 315. I'm primarily a painter and a printmaker, but I've been known to use a lot of different materials because I just like to try new things. There's always something new to do. I'm never really ever finished with anything, so I have been known to use things like toilet paper rolls and clothes and needle and thread and buttons and you name it, I've used it. I can't remember ever not knowing I was an artist. I probably wouldn't have called it an artist when I was a little girl, and I got in trouble for a lot of things. I can remember one of the first things that really sticks with me was from when I was very, very young. I don't know, I may have been 3 years old, and having crayons. And I wasn't very interested in coloring books, but we had radiators, and the crayons melted on the radiators. Oh, they were gorgeous. And they would run into each other, and then our radiators smelled like wax for the rest of our lives. But it was something that I really loved, and I can still remember being just totally intrigued. I think that human beings are the only creatures in the world that spontaneously create art. I think there are other creatures that use tools, and we've proven that. So I think that it's very different to have this need to create art. And it's not just artists that do it, it's everyone does it. How many kids have to carve their initials into a desktop? You just can't help it. How many trees do you go by that have been around for a long time and there isn't an initial in it? We have to do that. It's all mark making and it's all art.
Hi, I'm Marie Manning, also known as Twinkle. I'm a producer. I produce television, documentaries, and events. I've been an artist my entire life. When I think about what I'm most passionate about, it's writing. You know, when I'm writing, it's like something comes over me and into me and through me and out onto the paper or the keyboard or whatever tool I'm using to get the words out. And when I finish writing and I reread it, it's like I'm reading it almost for the first time, like it's someone else has written what are actually words that came from me, and that's absolutely magical to me. When I think about my art and how it impacts the world, I mean, I think that's what we all as artists want to do. We're doing it because we're passionate about it, but also in some measure of hope that it will affect other people in positive ways. Years ago, we had a friend in our community who had committed suicide, and I was asked to speak at her funeral. And I had no idea what I was going to say. You know, when something like that happens, you're angry and you're sad, and you know that you have to come together in this community to be able to grieve together and get through it together. And then my muse gave me a poem, and it was a really simple poem. It was no more than 12 lines. And I wrote it in all of 2 minutes, and I read it the next day at her funeral. And it moved everyone, and they really appreciated it. And then years later, when a dear friend of mine, her daughter passed, I sent her that poem, and they ended up using it in her memorial service as a reflective. And I think those are the things that make me realize that what I'm doing is important, because I can help people get through things. I feel it's a healing for them, and I feel it's a way of connecting with people so that they have that moment where they know that we are all connected, and that because of that, we can get through anything.
My name is Margaret Sutton Wales, and my studio is 210 next door. And I work in anything that is soluble in water, so I paint in watercolors, gouache, casein, and acrylics. After I retired and my husband and I built a house in Prince Edward Island, we always had things to do. And one morning there was nothing on the to-do list, so we said, let's have fun. So we opened up the newspaper, and the ad said, McPhail Homestead, art lessons, no experience and no supplies necessary. So on a total whim, we went and had a wonderful time. So we went back the next Wednesday, and the next Wednesday, and the next Wednesday, and I began to take my art pretty seriously. And I knew I was an artist when I sold my first painting. I was actually painting in a vineyard, and some tourists came by and asked if they could buy the painting, which was still wet and unsigned. And I had no idea what to charge them, so I tried to keep my composure, and, well, let me see. I sold it for $30 and celebrated with champagne that night.
My name is Mark Sutherland. I'm a marine artisan, which means that I work with ship models, maritime folk art. I do restoration work of figurehead, ship carvings, bone and ivory work, scrimshaw stuff, anything that relates to traditional maritime arts. My most visible one, I did a very large outdoor model which hangs over Main Street on Nantucket, and it's about 7 feet long and probably 6.5 feet high, and it's a whale ship, and it was a reconstruction of an early Nantucket whale ship from around 1820 called the Hero. And so that's been hanging outside year-round since 1998. Since I was a little kid, I was always interested in boats, and my grandfather had a summer house on Nantucket, and we used to go there every summer. So from the time that I was an infant, this is where we went in the summertime. And that was just paradisical. And Nantucket was deeply immersed in the history of ships and whaling and the old-time maritime industries. I read this chapter in the book of Stuart Little, and how he gets on a schooner and he goes bravely sailing across the pond, and there's a squall and a race and all kinds of dramatic adventures. And I was like, I've got to do this. I've got to make a model.
My name is Carole Zell. I work in ceramics. I do both functional and non-functional work. I started out studying painting. I got a bachelor's in painting, and I got a teacher's certificate, and I taught elementary art. Then decided that I wanted to go back to, or I wanted to try working at something more functional than painting. And so I went back and studied ceramics. I started out making functional ware, and then I moved out west to California, and out there representational ceramics was sort of taking off. There was some really exciting things being done, and my teacher was in the process of doing stuff like that. And so it was a big influence on me. Eventually I ended up being interested in theater and puppetry and the stage. So I started making stages and puppets and clay. And that went on for a pretty long time. And it progressed to making houses. My first stages had figures in them, sometimes family members and dancers. And as time progressed, the people sort of disappeared and the stages themselves became expressive.
My name is Kate Bird. I'm a still life landscape painter using mostly acrylics. I'm very attracted and inspired by the ocean environment. So most of my subjects involve the beach, coastal themes. Well, I'm really enjoying using shells right now because they're great models, especially in the winter. They don't move much. And I'm sort of making them much larger than real life, and concentrating on their sort of subtle shapes and very subtle coloration. I came to painting through the illustration route. I was an illustrator in medical art for a very long time at a local medical institution, and from there moved into painting and started with watercolor and water-soluble oils, and sort of found a comfortable place with acrylics. I've sold some of my most favorite pieces, but I usually photograph them or scan them so that I actually have some record of them. And I often make note cards from the paintings that I've sold, so I don't feel like they've left me entirely. But I'm happy that they've moved on to another home.
My name is Lois Anderson, and I'm a painter here at the Emerson Umbrella. I've been at the Umbrella as a subletter for about 7 years, but now I have my own studio, and thrilled to have it because I love this community. I've lived in Concord for almost 30 years, but I was born in Brooklyn and began making my paintings and pictures when I was just a little kid and stopped taking naps. That's when I started making pictures. My dad was an artist. He was a commercial artist. And so I really always wanted to be like my father. And he had his own studio in New York City with lots of art materials, and it was sort of magical for a little kid. So that's what I did, and I went to Pratt Institute and the Art Students League to learn painting in a school in Norway. I really never thought I would be anything but an artist. I was really never very good at anything else, and I was always good at making pictures and art. I love music. I did a little bit with music, but art really won out. I just love making things. I think my mind is made for the kind of activity that art making is. It's best at that, and I love it. It's like the most exquisite pain and joy all at the same time, making paintings. I think it's the way I'm wired. I think it's just a blessing that I'm allowed to and I'm able to.
I'm Louise Berliner, and I'm a writer and a fiber sculptor, but tomorrow I might be a painter. Art making is all these things for me: dance, music, singing, working in the garden. It's all connected. So sometimes I think when people say, "Oh, you're a writer," and I go, "Well, really, I'm a creative channel, you know, or I'm a being through whom creative things appear or move." I belonged to a collaborative studio many years ago called Turtle Studios in Watertown. And part of the principle of that place was play, that creativity comes from play. I really found that my voice showed up different ways on different days. You know, I was working on a novel back then, and when I would hit a block, I'd create something. I'd paint, I'd weave. And over time, I realized that I needed to use two hands. And so, for instance, if I were stuck, I could collage. And when I collaged, somehow my brain was able to come to the next step. I have a beautiful 24-year-old who's an artist, who was a studio art major at Carleton College and is now doing other stuff, but also making art. And I used to think, oh, you know, I do have a biography I've written. I've had poems and stories published and art bought, but it seems to me that she's the most magnificent thing I've produced. I confess.
I'm Barbara Willis. I'm a weaver.
I've been weaving for approximately 35 years. I weave mostly in chenille. I do some silk, some wools. I do some dyeing, chemical dyeing generally. I'm not interested in doing really complicated weave structures or anything like that. I like color and texture. Kafi Facet says, when in doubt, add 25 more colors. And that's sort of my mantra, I guess. I've always felt that one of our earliest memories is being wrapped in something warm and comforting. And that's, I work from that place, I think. I hope that my work, when someone puts on my work, a scarf or a coat or whatever, that they feel comforted, warmed, and that's just a feeling of comfort, going back to a much earlier place in our lives. One really highlight was when I was involved in an art to wear show at Cambridge Artists Co-op Gallery in Harvard Square. And when we walked up for the opening, they had taken a photograph of one of my coats, and it was on a sandwich board in front of the gallery. And I thought, oh my God, it was a stunning moment for me. It was like, I'm really an artist.
My name is Mary Jane Raymond, and I'm a learning specialist. I work with high-risk special needs students and adults, and have for many, many years. I am trained at Mass General Hospital and Carole School officially as a Norton Gillingham specialist, which means I teach people to read and write and spell and think more effectively and clearly. I love to teach, so I've had a good day. That makes me happy. I love to go to my quiet little home, not very far from this building, and I love to cook. I love to read. Anything from The Economist, which I basically understand about 70% of that material, to current news and my old New York Times that's hanging around from Sunday that I didn't get to. I raised a family, and I'm very proud of that. 3 very, very fine young men. I have a close-knit extended family, and I'm proud of that. And I really have loved every minute of the job that I've had for almost 60 years as a teacher. I would be happy sitting at a desk with a pencil in my hand smiling at a kid if that was my way to go. I'd go happily. Yeah. I don't think I could ever be somebody who just sat around. No. I'd be a lot of trouble. I would be. My sister said she'd be bailing me out wherever the nearest protest was.